yeah, I think a lot has changed since the last time we spoke. And Raham Project has developed a lot in the last year, and it's growing really fast, Sue, if I'm completely honest with you. Sometimes faster than I envision myself or that I can always cope with. There's been a lot of, I talk to my children about this all the time. You're in the learning pit. And every time I'm learning something, I keep telling my children, Mummy's in the learning pit. And the learning pit is a really horrible place to be because you don't know the answers. You really have to be pushed in your comfort zone and figure out how am I going to move forward. So I've been in that for the last couple of years, but in some ways I have really grown because of that.
Yeah.
And so Raham Project, like you said, Sue, is there to support mothers and partners from ethnic families. And we really are helping a lot of people who've recently used or are currently using UK maternity services. We're based locally in Peterborough, Cambridge area. However, we are extending our wings much further afield. And like your organization, we started in COVID as well. So that we've got quite a good online presence, I feel.
Mm.
So I would say the community is definitely growing. So we were doing these listening events, probably we've been doing them for the last, say, 2 to 3 years now. And they've been going really well. We do them monthly. And we essentially, through that work, realized that we had to create some sort of space and support for our families. So the listening sessions allowed us to start thinking more creatively. And through that, we ended up creating a support group for our families that's connected to our Facebook group. And we now, in the last 2 years, have been like getting mums to join. And we have about 400 mums on there from diverse backgrounds, which is really
Wow.
exciting. And it's quite an active group, it's quite an intimate group. Even though 400 sounds like a lot of people, it still feels quite intimate actually, because everybody somehow knows everybody,
Mm.
and that's quite a nice feeling. It kind of reminds me of my very Pakistani upbringing, where everybody knows everybody, and then you help each other and you give each other tips and guidance. So there's a really good like peer support group coming out of all of these listening sessions. So we've hosted 10 listening sessions in the last year. And this year, I'm constantly in the learning pit. I decided instead of back collecting my data, I'm going to collect it as I go along because that's a very sensible thing to do. And so what we found is that about our listening event forms have been filled out about 70 times from mums who wish to attend. Now, not all the mums actually attend every month because it's a Sunday evening once a month and life happens. They have children and they may not always be able to turn up. But I think it sets a really good kind of idea of the fact that people do want this sort of support, and people particularly from the South Asian community definitely do want it. And we found that the people who are attending are between their 20s and 40s. Three-quarters of the women who have attended are from South Asian backgrounds, and how they're starting to connect is actually mainly through Facebook, and about a quarter of them is through word of mouth. So this community connection is very important in our communities, and like people talk to each other and they suggest things to each other. And I think that's building trust, and trust is the key thing that we really want to build. So when I started the
Mm.
project, I never went in thinking we're going to undo years of things that my communities have experienced. I went in thinking this is going to take a really long time to get them back on board, actually. And I guess I
Mm.
identify with them as much as they identify with me, which makes it easier. But I think that trust and that relationship is really, really important. So I guess let's talk a bit about the listening events and like what kind of themes that we've got,
Mm.
because we've actually been creating a report, which I'm just going to say to everyone, it's going to get released hopefully by April-ish time. And it
Okay.
has all the information of what we've been doing, what stories mums have shared with us. So these voices are things that we want to echo. The
Mm.
families are coming and talking to us, and sometimes they just want to talk to somebody that they feel comfortable and safe with. Sometimes they want to take it further and they want to get some answers and they want some more hand holding, they want some more signposting and connecting and more information, and we'll help them with that as well. But we really felt passionate about the fact that every time we do a report, we're going to have these voices out there for anyone to read. So you can access that if you ever wanted via our like Facebook and our website. But some of the themes that
Mm.
we've been hearing from families, and if I'm completely honest with you, I'm recognizing that like change is slow, unfortunately. Um, And because of that, sometimes it feels like when I'm talking to families that change isn't happening as fast as maybe they need it to happen. So some of the themes that we've been like hearing from families are things like poor postnatal care. There's a lot of mums who come to our listening sessions that talk about that lack of postnatal care support, particularly when they're in hospital. There seems to be a bit of a theme about that. Things like if they are pressing the buzzer for support and people can't turn up, and that makes mothers feel very isolated and alone when they feel like they're struggling. I remember one mum talking about being left in a blood-stained gown. And, you know, it's those small acts of just pausing, thinking, supporting, that just makes that difference. And communicating, I would say, is a really, really big one. Another one that families seem to talk quite a lot about is actually breastfeeding support, really like needing more support than is given to them. And I think sometimes there's a preconceived idea that we come from families where often people tend to breastfeed and, you know, their mum will help or their sister will help. And whilst this is probably true, I think there needs to be a recognition that you're dealing with a different generation of people from the South Asian and even Black community now. Like, for example, some of us are second, third generation now, and there's things that our families lost, like there's life experiences they lost because they got disconnected from moving away from their families. And I really do think when it comes to the birth world, particularly in our South Asian community, we did lose that kind of support that I guess my mum talks about or my grandma talks about. So I'd say breastfeeding is another really big one. But you know, the biggest one of all is really communication, Sue. You know, mothers often talk about when communication is good, they feel safe, they feel supported, and they feel like they have a choice. But if communication is, you know, conversely the opposite, and it leads to more of a negative experience. And a lot of mothers spoke quite openly in our sessions about, you know, feeling like they were being judged, or there's a lack of compassion, or that they felt like when they were saying something they weren't being believed, whether that was to do with them feeling unwell or whether they're in labor or not. I remember a mother was speaking about feeling quite scared in theatre. And another key thing that I've noticed is a lack of like access in those early weeks of pregnancy. There seems to be not as much of a streamlined service. So families often feel when they first find out they're pregnant, who do I talk to? Where do I go? Every time I call someone, they're not picking up the phone. And these are common things that families talk about. And obviously this impacts their like their whole well-being, doesn't it? Because it impacts the way that they feel, their mental health. They feel more anxious, more worried. And I feel like a lot of this could be mitigated just through good communication and people who are there essentially when you call them. And I get the other side where I know services are so stretched, so my heart sits on the fence for both parties. But it's difficult to listen to people who have been through a lot of traumatic experiences. You can't help but question your own practice, question the system, and question what's happening that's causing that. And yeah, that's my reflection on the listening sessions. But through the listening sessions, we ended up creating this support group. And one of the activities that's been created on the support group is our coffee and chai sessions. These happen in the support group. So every month we also offer this now. So one of the mums that is the peer support coordinator is actually from Birmingham, and she helps run this group. She's fantastic.
When you talk about the coffee and chai sessions, which sounds lovely, is it, I'm guessing, trying to get a feel of, is it all new mums, or is it a combination of mums who've had their babies like 2 years ago or 3 years ago?
It's a mixture, Sue, really. We've got new mums, pregnant mums, and we have some mums who had their kids like 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And they want to come and join. And these are mums of my mum's generation. And it really reminds me how little has probably changed since the time that my mum was actually having children, and how much birth experiences actually impact us as women, as birthing people. We never forget. And so we are aiming for people around the perinatal period. However, we get on a very human level that if people are going to get any kind of experience, you're a valuable person. And motherhood is a universal language, isn't it? It doesn't matter how far in your journey you get, you can connect with another mum. If you are also a mum, there's something that you'll find in common that you can connect with. So we are quite open in our group, to be fair. The group has been doing really well. So that's continuing to flourish, which is very exciting. And another thing we're noticing is more and more families are starting to connect with us because they are having more like queries about things, and often they're connecting with us to ask us about information or share their experiences. And we do loads of different things with them. Like I said earlier, we signpost them to relevant information. We actually take our time to explain information to them in a way that they understand. We connect them back to hospital services. So there's a lot of advocacy and hand-holding happening for our communities that actually takes a lot of background work, Sue, that sometimes people don't recognize how much time that this kind of work can actually take. And, you know, essentially it's to try and create a support blanket for people from our communities. And like I said, it's going to take time because there's always been a bit of a trust issue. And even for me as a South Asian person, I'm trying to build that trust with the system, and I work in the system. It's a really bizarre like situation for me sometimes because I work in it, but I can see why my community also fear it. But through all of this work, what's happened is we've ended up collaborating with loads of different organizations. And like one of the projects we're working on at the moment is to do with this maternity equity hub. And we're doing this in partnership with the charity Barnardo's and Mind, our local Barnardo's and Mind. And essentially what our vision is, we're trying to like address these health inequalities, particularly families who are struggling with birth trauma, and families particularly from Black, Asian and mixed ethnicity kind of groups are the target audience. But what we're trying to do is create like a wraparound family hub support service that's tailored to the needs of these communities, but getting them to engage with the hub, getting the maternity services to engage, and then providing like perinatal mental health support right from the beginning up until after they've had a baby. And it really is an exciting project. So that's kind of where, I guess, where we were, where we're moving towards. And it'll be exciting to see once we're there what else we want to do.
The whole project, or especially the listening events, feels for me almost like an action it makes me think of action learning of a whole group of people, and almost like a village of people in a way, all being together and being able to share their experiences. And I guess the only problem would be is if people got stuck into, you know how when you're having a hard day at the office, back in the service, and you start moaning to someone, and then someone else will moan, and then someone else will moan. It all turns into a real downward spiral as you're going. How do you stop it doing that, Faiza? Because I bet you that from what you said, it doesn't sound like it's just a moaning shop. It sounds like it's a very lively event.
It is. And you know, one of the things I think that this is where the midwifery experience comes in. I completely recognize as a Pakistani person that people from my communities experience this kind of care. But as a midwife, I feel like practically what can we be doing that is changing and improving how your experiences are. So although Raham Project isn't run from a clinical perspective, and I don't offer clinical advice, I can offer information. I can completely tell them who they can go to. I can give them those nuggets of information. So a lot of the listening sessions now start, Sue, by asking families to join us. And we've started using themes now. So about a month and a half ago, we've done C-sections and we've done pelvic health not so long ago. But like with the C-section one, we had 8 mums turn up, Sue, and every single one of them was crying by the end of the session. And part of the session was actually we educate. So the beginning is always it's a very loose and relaxed structure. We're all very honest and open with each other. There are no barriers whatsoever, and it has to be like that. We meet each other as mothers. And so the beginning is always me consciously making an effort to say, this is this is the topic we're talking about. This is what the research suggests about it. This is what the numbers are saying. This is what my experience has been. I get mums who have had the experience to come and share their experience, and then we talk about how their experience leveled up to what the gold standard should have been. And I think that's really important, because health, even health illiteracy is very high in our communities, Sue. If they don't know what it should be like, they have got nothing to compare it to apart from their own experience. If they don't know that they can have skin straight after a C-section, then how are they going to ever think that that's an option? And so part of it is educating them, and I'm very conscious about that. And I guess you'll see that through these listening events, we create our infographics, which are now being shared. So thank you.